The Uncharted series frankly needs no introduction. In just a 10-year span from 2007 to 2017, these 5 games raised the bar for cinematic adventures both in and outside the world of gaming, and in the process quickly became one of the best-selling franchises in history. To think that Uncharted achieved this level of overwhelming success and ended on a high note after just 5 games? That's incredible. And false. You see, there are actually many more Uncharted games than just the Naughty Dog ones. In fact, by my count, you could argue that there are up to half a dozen lost Uncharted games that Sony either doesn't like to talk about, or that Sony actively wants you to forget. And surprisingly, not one of those is uncarded. I'm sure that most of you know one of these games, but I'm also sure that most of you have never played it, so let's start there with Uncharted Golden Abyss on the PlayStation Vita. Developed by Sony Bend, now known for 2019's Days Gone, Golden Abyss is probably, in my opinion, the most impressive game on the Vita, and maybe the most impressive handheld game made, period, before the Switch, in that it's more or less a direct translation of what made Uncharted so captivating, but crunched down onto a portable system. Now obviously that's exactly what you'd want from the game, and that's what Sony was hoping that every Vita title would be, but as we saw with games like the horrible Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified or Resistance Burning Skies, or even half-decent attempts like Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, it's really hard to pull console quality on this system. Really, that's a key reason why the Vita failed. If you promise PS3 level games and then players see something that falls more between PS3 and, I don't know, PS2, they're not gonna buy in. And although the footage you're seeing here certainly looks rough around the edges, and I mean that literally because the anti-aliasing is atrocious, this is one of the only Vita games that achieves that promise. Golden Abyss serves as a standalone prequel in Nathan Drake's saga, taking place about a year or two before Drake's fortune, and like every good prequel, it introduces us to a handful of brand new characters, like Drake's old pal Jason Dante, who we immediately know is one of the main villains because the game gives that away at the start. Okay, great, who else? Oh, and Marissa Chase, Drake's love interest, who we immediately know isn't coming back because, you know, Elena. Yay. Obviously, it's always a red flag with prequels when we're introduced to characters that we know we'll never see again, but I do have to say, the writing does a great job of making you get a feel for these characters, and it almost makes you wonder what's gonna happen, even though if you're like me, you've already seen the main series through to the end. The plot revolves around an ancient Panamanian dig site with strange connections to the Spanish colonization of Central America, as Dante invites Drake to the site to help figure out just what happened here over 400 years ago. We quickly find out that Dante took the site over when an archaeologist, Chase's grandfather, went missing, and that Dante had given all of their findings to a revolutionary general trying to overthrow the Panamanian government. I know, that's a lot to take in already. I promise, the plot is relatively straightforward, following the usual ebbs and flows of an Uncharted game as we uncover a centuries-old secret and then learn about a forgotten society. And for what it's worth, it works. Dante is a decent foil for Drake as one of the rare characters that can match Nate's quick wit. Chase, while being your one-and-done Bond girl, or I suppose Indiana Jones girl in practice, shows a side to Drake that the main series never really cared to address that often. Because she's a normal, upstanding archaeologist in training and not a treasure hunter like most of the Uncharted cast, for most of the game, Chase refuses to use a gun because she hasn't killed before. And later on, when she finally decides it's time for a gun, Nate initially turns her down and warns her that,
for some things, there's no turning back.
Only once or twice do we get to see Drake come to terms with the fact that he's killed probably thousands of people over the course of the main games, so it's positively refreshing to see this game acknowledge the weight behind pulling the trigger. Or in many cases, snapping necks, throwing people off buildings, you know, the usual. Drake really is a psychopath. And perhaps my favorite little touch in this game reflects Drake's, let's call it experience over his companions here. For the first half of Golden Abyss, he's almost held back by Chase's inexperience as he lifts her up to ledges and then waits for her to slowly search for a rope or crate that he can climb, or when she runs ahead and almost gets herself killed, or when he provides sniper cover for her because she ran ahead and almost got herself killed. She runs ahead a lot. But in the second half, things change drastically when Nate calls in an old friend for help. After all, it wouldn't be an Uncharted game without Sully.
I don't need Sully.
12 seconds later.
Sully, I need you.
That much I got.
Once Sully enters the picture, we see him and Nate climbing together much more efficiently as a team. The pace is knocked up several ticks, and there are even a few really fun back and forth sections when the duo is split up by a chasm between them. Plus, Sully is technically playable for one really bad section of the game, so there's that. Remember Uncharted 1's jet ski section? Yeah, nobody asked for you, but welcome back. Golden Abyss becomes a sort of game of two halves, and that, in my opinion, helps each half stand out immensely. Now, as for how Golden Abyss plays, in short, it's Uncharted, but on the Vita. It truly is a near one-to-one analog. The main differences are also, in many ways, Golden Abyss's biggest shortcomings, and most of these have to do with the game utilizing every gimmick on the new system. This was a Vita launch title after all, so you gotta cram in every feature that we didn't ask for. At first, it's kinda neat to use the touchpads to rotate treasure and wipe off all of the dirt, or to use the touchpads to rub an etching with charcoal, or to use the touchpads to zoom in and out with a sniper or the optional camera, or to use the touchpads for swipe-based QuickTime events. I guess what I'm saying here is this game really likes the touchpad, and on the Vita itself, it's not unintrusive, but it's at least kinda harmless. In one of the cases, I actually quite like the ability to swipe a path on the touchscreen that Nate will automatically follow when climbing instead of just, pressing X 15 times in a row. The main issue is that these events happen all the time. The game really likes to toss treasure at you more so than any other Uncharted game. On one hand, that's really cool because these collectibles tie into little lore mysteries and give backstory on the characters or the mystery of the dig site. But on the other hand, it really breaks the pace to have to wipe your touchscreen every few minutes or after adrenaline-pumping set pieces. Especially in my case because I was playing this game on the PlayStation TV, the Vita's sort of console counterpart. The issue there is that Golden Abyss was never made compatible with the PS TV due to a few specific issues such as gyroscope controls when balancing above bottomless pits. That is, even though to play a PS TV you have to have a DualShock 3 or 4, both of which have gyro controls, so really it's just that they were too lazy to update the damn system. I ended up modifying my PS TV to let me play the game and record the footage that you've been watching, but I couldn't get the fan-made gyro patch to work, so I dealt with a much worse Golden Abyss experience than you would if you were playing on the Vita proper. The aiming control without the gyro is horrendous, and there are several balancing sections where the game is supposed to be unplayable on the PS TV because without the gyro you can't balance, and without the ability to balance, you die. But because I'm an idiot, I was able to cheese every single one of these thanks to some very well-placed jumps and a lot of patience. That's right, f*** you game, this took me 25 minutes. Thanks to those jumps though, the only time I was forced to move over to a real Vita was for Chapter 12 when Nate's sliding down a muddy river with tilt controls. That one is impossible to beat on a PS TV. When I was playing on the Vita though, most of my actual control issues fell away instantly. On the system it's meant for, Uncharted Golden Abyss is just stellar. It plays great, it looks even better. In fact, hot take here, I would put this game above Uncharted 3, and in my book, it's neck and neck with Drake's Fortune. I went in expecting a forgettable experience, and although it's not plot significant to the rest of the games, Golden Abyss makes up for that by bringing a very different vibe that Uncharted lost, starting with 2. The first game was very much about hunting for treasure with this excellent cast of characters, but with 2 onward, Uncharted moved more into a cinematic style that I still love of course, but that left me wanting a bit more of that down-to-earth vibe that the first game had. If Uncharted's 1 through 4 are Indiana Jones, Golden Abyss is more like the 1930s and 40s adventure serials that inspired Indy. Now, perhaps it wasn't totally fair to assume that many of you have never played Golden Abyss, as it's actually the best-selling Vita game of all time. But that's kind of like saying Wario Land is the best-selling game on the Virtual Boy, it doesn't really mean much. I mean, Uncharted 4 outsold the Vita, the entire system, by itself. Only about 1.5 million copies of Golden Abyss are out in the wild, with about half of that in the West, so Golden Abyss isn't a forgotten game as much as a game that was left behind. After all, if Sony wanted us to remember it, it could have easily highlighted this adventure to 3 times as many people by including it in October 2015's Nathan Drake collection. Obviously, a handful of changes would have had to be made, and it wouldn't have been that pretty, but frankly, neither was Uncharted 1. Considering how solid this game is, I really think it would have been a worthy addition, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. The official reason given was that the main trilogy is a contained narrative arc that leads into Uncharted 4, so it wasn't deemed necessary to toss Golden Abyss in, but that doesn't really feel like a great take when we saw Microsoft provide Halo's ODST side game as DLC for the Master Chief Collection a year prior. My personal guess is that either the assets were simply not that scalable to proper HD, which, along with some of the Vita mechanics, could have made things problematic for the port team at Bluepoint, or, far more likely, that the Nathan Drake collection was a quick port job to fill the gap after Uncharted 4 was delayed, and that there simply wasn't enough time to get a fourth game tossed in. It's not even like you could argue that it's just a case of Sony wanting to forget the Vita and move on, since they made PS4 remasters of 2 other Vita games in the same time frame. Tearaway a month prior in September 2015, and Gravity Rush in December, which was also made by Bluepoint. For whatever reason it wasn't meant to be, and Golden Abyss will forever be a footnote in the failed legacy of the Vita. And now we get to nest a smaller footnote inside that footnote and look at a game that I can promise you Sony does want you to forget, one that they outright delisted in most regions: Uncharted Fight for Fortune, a 2012 Vita card game based on the Uncharted series. That's right, we may not have ever gotten our Uncarded, but we did get an Uncarded. That's gonna be confusing. Thanks to the magic of game preservation, I was able to install Fight for Fortune on my PS TV, but I wasn't able to obtain the Uncharted 2 or 3 DLC campaigns. Thankfully, I wasn't missing much because this game is not very good. I know, a half-assed card battle game isn't very good, shocker. Fight for Fortune's base game features a campaign mode based loosely on Uncharted 1's story, and by loosely I mean it has such beloved characters like Blaine. Remember him? No? Yeah, that's the correct answer. The game sets you up with 5 card spaces and 5 card types. There are character cards that are split into hero, villain, and mercenary classes, there are fortune cards, and there are resource cards. Each character has different effects, like doing extra damage to other characters, bypassing the 1-turn waiting period between placing a card and it attacking, and others. After you place a character card, you can then stack a fortune card underneath it, which would allow you to obtain its full gold value, or cash it in immediately for 5 gold. And this gold is then spent on resource cards that can be a health regen for a hurt character, or a damage or defense buff. From there, it's your basic card battle game. Try and take out enough cards on the enemy side that you can do direct damage to that enemy player's health and knock them down to 0 before they can do so to you. It's honestly a neat little system on paper. Each character requires a number of points for you to summon them, and each character class has its own summon points that increase by 1 each turn. There's enough strategy here that the game could be pretty fun if not for the incredibly bare-bones presentation and the fact that you can't actually use custom decks in the campaign for some godforsaken reason. You can repeat each campaign mission up to 5 times to unlock more cards, but obviously that's pointless now unless you want some trophies, I suppose. And seriously, the card animations are as cheap as can be, and there's no music whatsoever during battles. It's like they wanted you to not play this game. The only neat feature that Fight for Fortune had was cross-compatibility with Golden Abyss. By sending over cards you'd earned by killing enemies or by finding treasure in Golden Abyss, you could power up those cards even more in Fight for Fortune. At least, it sounds cool on paper. I'm sure if this game had any sort of metagame, that would be a total pain for those that just want to play Uncarded and didn't want to play Uncharted. Since the online servers were taken down in September 2019, after apparently already having been down by accident for 6 months before that, oops, you can only play the campaign or one system pass-and-play multiplayer, and there's just not enough here to justify the game on that alone, hence why it was delisted. I'd say this is the darkest chapter in Uncharted's history, but we've still got some games to go, just you wait. Then again, the tutorial fight is against Donut Drake, so you know what, I take it all back, this was worth it. The final thing that Fight for Fortune is notable for is that it features characters from Uncharted Eye of Indra, the most tenuous item on this list. I say item because it's definitely not a game, it's a motion comic available on the PS3. But it's only available on the PS3, was designed by Naughty Dog, more specifically with Neil Druckmann as the lead writer, and is talked about by approximately nobody, so I wanted to at least highlight it. This story is Nate's first run-in with Eddie Raja from Uncharted 1, and it features Eddie's sister Rika, who was seemingly supposed to be in Uncharted 2 based on Druckmann's comments that Eye of Indra would tie Uncharted's 1 and 2 together. That tie-in to Uncharted 2 never came to fruition though, so instead she's just a premium multiplayer skin, which is meaningless now that the multiplayer servers are down. Yay. But yeah, this exists, and it's a neat little story at the very least. Plus, it serves as arguably Druckmann's first proper lead writing credit, as he was only a co-writer for the first 3 Uncharteds. But if you don't want to count this little comic as his first credit, he did apparently write the story for Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, which came out just 3 weeks after Uncharted 2. What's that? We don't like Lost Frontier? Well, he wrote it, so nobody's perfect. The last stop in our chronological romp through the Uncharted series takes us to Uncharted Drake's Trail, a game that I can't really even show you much of because this one straight up doesn't exist anymore. This game was featured on the European promotional site for Uncharted back in 2007 and utilized both Google Maps and Flash for thrilling point-and-click action on a real-world map. Since 2007, Google has significantly overhauled its Maps API, so even if the website weren't completely taken down, this game would still likely be impossible to play today, even if you could find it. So instead, I'll do what any good journalist does: read Wikipedia. Hey y'all, Elena Fisher is filming some tombs in Egypt for her television show when she hears word that an explorer named Nathan Drake is on to something big. She wants to find Nathan so that she can film whatever he's after, but as she's too busy in Egypt to look for Drake herself, she hires you, an investigator, to track him down. She believes that he may have attracted some unwanted attention, so that he will, therefore, be covering his tracks. She gives you the address of Nathan's apartment in Key West, Florida, to get you started. This is really easy. I like this. Yeah, this was literally just a point-and-click game. There's nothing to see here. But I can bet that 99% of you didn't know about it before, huh? Huh? Yeah, that's what I get paid the big bucks for. All that sick ad revenue. I'm just sitting on stacks of money. You could almost say that I'm a fortune hunter. Uncharted fortune hunter. The most recent of two Uncharted apps, and the second to last game we'll be discussing today, Uncharted Fortune Hunter is a tie-in puzzle game that lets you play as Nathan Drake in thrilling missions like walk over there, grab that thing, and even pick up the treasure. Actually, you know what? This does all sound like Uncharted. This kind of checks out. Fortune Hunter was released for iOS and Android in 2016, back when Sony really liked doing some weak PlayStation crossover apps to give you weak bonus content. By completing some of this game's 200 levels, you can unlock multiplayer content for Uncharted 4, which is currently the last Uncharted multiplayer standing. Give it about 2 years, that'll be gone too. This game honestly isn't all that bad. It's sort of like a Hitman Go grid-based game, but naturally with more of an Uncharted flourish. Just drag your finger across the grid to move, Nate, plan your path and avoid obstacles like arrow traps, collapsing floor spaces, spikes, you know, the usual treasure hunter stuff. For as simple as it is, I'll give credit where it's due, it's got some neat callbacks, like the different costumes based on each game, and even this big costume based on Drake's original outfit when Uncharted was still referred to as Project Big. It's also got a mime Drake, which is supposed to shut up all of his quips during gameplay, which don't really happen that often anyway, so that's kind of useless. This is another example of a game that Sony probably isn't trying to get you to forget outright. After all, if it was, they would have pulled it from the app stores by now. But it's certainly one that they would rather you not know exists. Despite that, altogether, it's a cute little game, and it's pretty quality at that. But you can't help but feel that this low-budget sort of project even existing kind of tarnishes the series' glossy sheen just a teensy bit. For what it's worth, Fortune Hunter passed over 1 million downloads on Android alone, so odds are more people have played this than Golden Abyss. God, that is sad. If I had the choice, I think I'd rather play Lara Croft Go than Fortune Hunter to get my fix of on-the-go puzzling featuring a world-traveling adventurer. That game has a lot more style, even if this one has more levels, but then that's a $6 game and this is free, so... And to close things out, remember when I said that Fight for Fortune was almost Uncharted's darkest moment? Well, let me refresh your memory of PlayStation All-Stars Island, sponsored by Coke Zero. For smartphones in Europe only. Have you ever been halfway up a cliffside only to realize that, golly, are you parched? Drake has, and that's why he carries bottles of Coke Zero on him for when unquenchable thirst strikes. Play Uncharted, Drake's Pursuit, and control Drake as he escapes dehydration by running from a temple, no relation, and collecting the crisp, refreshing, 0 calorie, 0 sugar, Coke Zero! Conveniently found in this tropical jungle where Coke Zero is a native commodity. That's real. All of what you just saw is real. You know what? At least it wasn't Uncharted 3's Subway tie-in.
Subway, where winners eat. Ow.
So, yeah, Uncharted has certainly had some games that I'm sure that Sony would really rather forget happened. But that's kind of a shame because at least one of them was really, really good. It just came out on the wrong system at the wrong time. The rest of them, though, yeah, no, I don't know. PS3 era Sony was really weird. And if you want to see some more great examples of weird, bad, late PS3 era Sony, and you want to get more of a glimpse into
PlayStation All-Stars Island, sponsored by Coke Zero.
Who keeps doing that? You should watch my video highlighting all of Ratchet & Clank's crossovers and cameos in other games. As always, thank you very much for watching, sharing, subscribing, and supporting, and until next time, stay golden. This video was made possible in part thanks to supporters on Patreon, including my Golden Bolt backers such as Goldstorm07 and Silver Bolts like Mayor Hairbear and Buckles Chucklow. If you would like access to exclusive behind-the-scenes perks and bonuses, or you just want to support future videos, visit patreon.com/thegoldenbolt. Thank you.